When my doctor's words finally registered, my mind went blank. It felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. "Mr. Connor, I'm sorry, but the tests confirm it. You're unable to have children." I couldn't make sense of it. Me? Infertile? How was that possible when I was a father of 3? Our family photo album was full of memories with my children, their first steps, first words, birthdays, holidays. Every image in my mind was a picture of love and pride. So, why did it feel like everything was suddenly untrue? It all started innocently enough. I'd been dealing with some minor health issues, nothing life-threatening but enough to bother me. My doctor suggested a full checkup, including some routine tests, just to be safe. Infertility hadn't even been a concern, it was one of those random things they checked as part of a broader profile. But when the results came back, they painted a shocking picture. I could barely grasp the doctor's words as he explained the specifics of my condition. "It's called azoospermia," he said gently, watching my reaction. "There are no sperm in your semen. It's a condition you've likely had your whole life." The only response I could muster was a hollow laugh. How could this be true? I had a son and 2 daughters, each a miracle in their own right. My oldest was now 12, my youngest barely 5. I'd held each of them in my arms, watched them grow. I'd been there for every scraped knee and every bedtime story. I was their dad. But now, a cruel twist of fate, a condition I'd never even heard of, was unraveling my whole life. For the first few days, I couldn't bring myself to confront my wife, Amelia. I kept telling myself that it had to be a mistake. There had to be another explanation. But, no matter how hard I tried to shake off the fear, doubt crept in. My mind became a mess of what-ifs. What if Amelia knew something I didn't? What if there was someone else? I kept replaying old memories in my mind, looking for clues, signs I'd somehow missed. But Amelia had always seemed so genuine, so present. We'd been together for over 15 years, high school sweethearts who'd built a life from nothing. She was my rock, my everything. I decided that I had to know the truth, no matter what. I started looking into DNA testing kits online, rationalizing it as a way to eliminate my doubts. I reasoned that if my kids were truly mine, then perhaps there was another medical explanation. But part of me knew, really knew, that these tests would bring answers I wasn't ready for. A few days later, the test kits arrived. Amelia noticed the package, of course. She even made a joke about it. "What, you're planning on finding out you're some secret prince?" she laughed, oblivious to the darkness twisting inside me. I tried to play it off, mumbling something about curiosity. But the ache in my chest grew deeper. That night, after the kids were asleep, I swabbed each of them carefully, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I wondered if they could sense my hesitation, my anxiety. Could they tell that the father they loved was crumbling inside? I told myself I was doing this to protect them, to protect our family. But it felt like betrayal, like I was tearing down my own life. Waiting for the results was agony. Every day I stared at the door, hoping the results would come and at the same time dreading what they might reveal. I watched Amelia interact with the kids, saw the love in her eyes. It all felt like some sick, twisted joke. How could I ever confront her about this? How could I look at her and ask, "Did you lie to me?" As I went to bed each night, I lay awake for hours, my mind spinning with fear and resentment. I wanted to blame her, to imagine she'd hidden some sordid secret from me. But then I'd look at her, peacefully asleep next to me, and feel my anger turn to sorrow. I loved her, that was the worst part. I still loved her deeply, and yet, this one discovery was turning that love into something dark and painful. Finally, the results arrived. I waited until the house was quiet, until Amelia had left for a weekend trip with her sister, and I was alone. My hands shook as I opened the envelope, reading each line slowly, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the DNA report was clear, undeniable, my children, weren't biologically mine. In that moment, it was as if time stopped. My whole identity as a father, everything I'd built my life on, was ripped away. I sat there, numb and silent, my hands still clutching the papers that confirmed the unthinkable. Amelia's face flashed before my eyes, our wedding day, the first time she told me she was pregnant. Had it all been a lie? The entire weekend, I barely moved. I sat with those test results in my hand, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My mind was spinning with 100 questions, each more painful than the last. If the kids weren't biologically mine, then who was their father? How long had this been going on? Was it just one man, or more? When Amelia returned home with the kids, I tried my best to act normal. But even simple things like asking how her trip went felt tainted. I found myself watching her every move, trying to see if there was some hint of guilt in her eyes, a hesitation in her smile. But she was the same Amelia, laughing with the kids, telling me stories from the weekend, making dinner while humming her favorite tune. It all felt surreal, like I was watching a stranger. I knew I couldn't go on pretending. I had to confront her, but how could I even begin? I waited until the kids had gone to bed that night, and as she curled up next to me, I took a deep breath. My voice was barely a whisper as I asked, "Amelia, do you love me?" The question sounded strange, even to me, but I needed to hear her say it. I needed to believe it. She looked at me with those familiar, warm eyes. "Of course, I love you," she said, her tone soft and confused. "Why would you even ask that?" I felt my throat tighten, but I pushed on. "Then why did you lie to me?" The room went still. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw a flicker of fear, quickly hidden beneath a layer of calm. "What do you mean, lie to you? What are you talking about?" "Amelia," I said, my voice trembling, "I went for a medical test. Something's wrong with me. They said I can't have children." I watched her face carefully, hoping to see some sign of denial, confusion, anything that might prove my fears wrong. But instead, her expression changed, and she looked away, as if searching for the right words. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "Tell me the truth, Amelia," I pleaded. "Who is the father of our children?" She looked back at me, her face pale, and in that moment, I saw the truth. She didn't even need to say it. My heart shattered, breaking into pieces I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to put back together. But I needed to hear it from her. I needed her to confirm the betrayal, to make it real. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a deep breath, barely able to meet my gaze. "It's complicated," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you, but things happened. I thought it would be better this way, that it wouldn't change anything. You're still their father, in every way that matters." Her words felt like a slap in the face. "Better this way?" I hissed, barely able to contain the anger boiling inside me. "You think lying to me, building our whole family on a lie, was better? You kept this from me for over a decade, Amelia." She flinched, as if my words had physically hurt her. "It wasn't like that," she protested, her voice desperate. "You have to understand, it wasn't just one thing. You're the best father to them, and I knew if I told you." "If you told me what, Amelia?" "That you'd been unfaithful. That my children aren't even mine." I could barely breathe, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. I wanted to scream, to make her feel the depth of the pain she'd caused. But there was something in her eyes, a sadness, a deep regret, that kept me from lashing out. She looked so small, so fragile, and despite everything, a part of me still loved her. She took a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "It happened a long time ago," she said, her hands twisting together nervously. "When we were going through a rough patch. I made a mistake. I didn't think it would come to this, that it would lead to this." "So, was it one man?" I asked, my voice barely holding back the fury I felt. One mistake that lasted long enough for 3 children. She fell silent, looking down at her hands, and that silence spoke volumes. My heart sank, and a cold realization washed over me. This wasn't just a one-time affair. Whatever had happened, it had been ongoing, possibly spanning years. My mind raced as I thought about all the memories, the moments we'd shared, now tainted by this betrayal. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked, my voice softer now, more pleading than angry. I deserved to know the truth, Amelia. Her eyes filled with tears, and she finally looked up at me, her gaze filled with a mixture of guilt and pain. I was afraid, okay? I was terrified that if I told you, you'd leave. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I didn't want to lose that. I know I was selfish, but I thought if I kept it hidden, it would just go away. I sat there, feeling a mix of anger, sorrow, and betrayal. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still loved her, the woman I thought I knew, the mother of my children, my best friend. But now, I wasn't sure if that person had ever truly existed, or if she'd been a mirage, a mask hiding a stranger. I got up slowly, my mind numb as I stumbled into the living room, away from her tear-filled eyes. I needed space, needed to think. She didn't try to stop me. I could feel her watching me, but I couldn't bring myself to look back. The weight of the truth pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. I spent the night on the couch, staring into the darkness, my thoughts a storm of confusion and pain. Every smile, every shared moment now felt tainted, a part of some elaborate deception. And yet, even amid the anger, a part of me couldn't imagine my life without them, without her, without the kids. Morning came, and with it, a dull ache that had settled in my chest. I knew I had to confront Amelia again, to ask the questions I still didn't have answers to. Who was the man, or men, who fathered my children? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, where did we go from here? For now, though, I sat there, numb and exhausted, wondering if I'd ever find a way to move forward. I spent another night on the couch, haunted by Amelia's words and the silent admission of her betrayal. I could barely recognize the woman I thought I knew. When morning came, Amelia came to me, her face filled with sorrow, but there was something else there too, a need to unburden herself, to lay bare the truth she'd hidden. Please, she whispered, her voice raw. Let me explain. I wanted to yell, to walk away, but I was rooted in place. I gave her a nod, holding my breath as she began to speak. It was years ago, she started, her voice trembling. We were going through so much stress, especially with trying to have kids. You were working all the time, and I felt so alone. Her voice trailed off, and she looked down, ashamed. I didn't mean for it to happen. But I met someone. He was there for me in a way I felt I needed. My stomach twisted as she described how her friendship with this man had turned into something more. She said it had only been brief, that she thought it was a mistake, but the damage was done. That encounter happened just before she found out she was pregnant with our first child. Her confession didn't stop there. Amelia revealed that she hadn't seen this man in years, but there was a second relationship, one that happened in a weak moment during a business trip. She didn't deny that this was a pattern, and the truth of it hit me like a hammer. I had built a life on a lie, trusted her completely, only to find that she had kept me in the dark. She begged for forgiveness, saying she didn't know how to tell me, that she tried to leave it all behind. I asked her about the children, my voice barely steady. Did you ever consider what you were doing to them? To me? She fell silent, and I could see the regret in her eyes. Yet the damage was already done. As the weight of her betrayal settled in, I knew I had to do more. I couldn't just live with her words and empty apologies. I needed to know who the real fathers of my children were. My children deserved to know, too. After much agonizing thought, I told her that I wanted to pursue further DNA testing, not just for me, but for each of the kids. She nodded, resigned. I understand, she whispered, but her face showed a flicker of fear. The tests were ordered, and each day waiting felt like torture. The kids, oblivious, went on with their lives, but I was a wreck, barely able to keep up appearances. Amelia and I barely spoke, only exchanging glances filled with shame, anger, and guilt. After what felt like an eternity, the results arrived. My hands trembled as I opened each envelope, my heart pounding with every line I read. It was as though time stopped as I read that none of my 3 children were biologically mine. None. I felt gutted, empty. The realization shattered any illusions I had clung to. I closed my eyes, holding the reports close. The children I had raised, loved, and cared for, they were hers but not mine. The life we'd built was nothing more than a house of cards, and I was trapped within its ruins. I knew I couldn't avoid the next step. I needed to know the identity of the man or men who had fathered the children I had raised as my own. With a heavy heart, I asked Amelia directly, bracing myself for what would come next. After a long silence, she admitted that one of the men was an old friend from college. She had reconnected with him during a difficult period in our marriage, but she claimed it was brief, a lapse in judgment. She confessed that she had no way of knowing who among the men she'd been with might be the father of each child, as she had kept all of it hidden. Fueled by a mix of anger and desperation, I found myself reaching out to the man Amelia had named, confronting him face to face. He seemed taken aback when I revealed the DNA results, but he neither denied nor confirmed anything outright. He, too, seemed broken by the news, shaken at the possibility that he might be a father without ever knowing it. Yet, he told me he would agree to a paternity test if it meant finding the truth. This conversation left me feeling hollow. Here was a man who might share my children's blood, a stranger stepping into the roles I had filled their entire lives. As the strain between Amelia and me grew more apparent, our children began to sense something was wrong. They asked questions, noticing the tension in the house. I struggled to keep it together, worried that the truth would destroy them if it ever came to light. My oldest child asked me one night, "Dad, are you mad at Mom?" The simplicity of the question broke me, but I tried to reassure him, masking my pain with a forced smile. Little did they know, the foundation of their world was about to change forever. Amelia and I debated what to tell the kids. Should we reveal the truth, or keep them sheltered from it? The decision weighed heavily on me. I wanted to protect them, but I also didn't want them to live a lie. Ultimately, I decided that they had a right to know who they were, and I would have to explain everything delicately, without turning them against their mother. The conversation with the kids was one of the hardest moments of my life. Sitting them down, I told them that sometimes adults make mistakes and that the things we thought were true might not always be as they seem. I tried my best to explain that I loved them no matter what, that they were my children, even if not biologically. Their eyes were filled with confusion, sadness, and fear, and I couldn't help but hate what this truth had done to them. In the weeks that followed the revelation, life in our home felt like walking through a fog of unspoken pain. Amelia and I kept our interactions minimal, reduced to logistical discussions about the kids' schedules, school projects, and meal plans. Yet, even in these brief exchanges, the weight of her betrayal hung between us like an invisible wall. The children felt the shift. Our youngest, too young to fully grasp what was happening, began clinging to me, his big eyes searching my face for reassurance. Our middle child, once boisterous and confident, had grown quieter, casting nervous glances at us whenever we were in the same room. And my oldest, he was perceptive, too perceptive. One night, he asked me directly, "Are we still a family, Dad?" I held him close, unable to answer. I wanted to tell him that we were, that nothing had changed, but how could I promise that? I assured him of my love, telling him that no matter what, he and his siblings were my children. Yet, I knew he could sense the truth, that our family was fractured in a way that couldn't be ignored. As days turned into weeks, the loneliness gnawed at me. My heart ached to fix things, to restore the life we once shared, but I knew that trust was a bridge too broken to mend. I was trapped between my love for my children and the irreparable damage to my relationship with Amelia. At this point, I could no longer live in limbo. I needed to confront Amelia one last time. Sitting across from her in the quiet of our living room, I saw a woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, the person I thought I would spend my life with. Now, she was a stranger, someone who had kept so much hidden, who had worn a mask for so many years. She looked at me, her eyes filled with remorse. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. "Just don't leave. The kids, they need you." I searched her face, trying to find some semblance of the woman I fell in love with, but I couldn't reconcile the two. I told her, as gently as I could, that I needed time away. "I can't keep living this way," I said, my voice breaking. "You made choices that affected us all, choices I can't just forget. I need space to heal." Amelia's face crumpled, but she nodded, her voice soft. "I understand. I'm so sorry, for everything." Despite the pain, I felt a strange sense of relief in finally saying the words aloud. I knew that this decision would break our family in a way, but I also knew that staying would tear me apart even more. I told her I would move out but stay close by, committed to being there for the kids. The conversation left us both drained, a mixture of sadness and reluctant acceptance. We had both come to terms with the truth, we could never go back to what we once were. Moving out was a quiet, solemn affair. I packed my belongings while the children were at school, wanting to shield them from the painful sight of me leaving. Each item I placed in a box felt like a small death, reminder of the life we'd built together that was now crumbling. I looked around the home we'd made together, the walls covered with photos, the children's artwork pinned to the fridge, and the family mementos scattered throughout. When the children returned home, I sat them down, struggling to find the right words. "I'm going to be living somewhere else for a while," I told them, fighting back tears. "But I'll still see you every day. You're my kids, and nothing will ever change that." Their reaction was a mixture of confusion and sadness. My middle child clung to me, asking if it was his fault, while my oldest stared at me, his face a mask of hurt and betrayal. "You're still my dad, right?" he asked, his voice small. The words cut through me, but I reassured him as best I could, telling him that my love for them hadn't changed. I moved into a small apartment nearby, a place that felt bare and empty. Without the children's laughter and the chaos of family life, the silence was deafening. But over time, I began to find small moments of peace. The pain lingered, but I started to rebuild, focusing on my relationship with the kids, ensuring that they felt loved and supported through the upheaval. Months passed, and with each passing day, the raw edges of my pain began to soften. I settled into a routine, splitting my time between work and spending every possible moment with the kids. The trust in Amelia was gone, but I found that I could at least maintain a civil relationship with her for the sake of the children. Through co-parenting, I began to see Amelia's own struggle with guilt and regret. She did everything she could to support the children and tried to stay involved in their lives, though she knew that the dynamic between us would never be the same. We talked less about the past and more about the future, working together to help our children navigate this new reality. With time, I came to understand that fatherhood was more than biology. My children didn't need my DNA, they needed my love, guidance, and unwavering presence in their lives. This realization brought a sense of peace, a hard-won acceptance that, no matter the betrayal, my role in their lives remained vital. Eventually, I found myself able to let go of the resentment. The anger that had once consumed me dulled into a quiet acceptance. I would always carry the scars, but they no longer defined me. I knew I would always love my children, would always be their father in every way that mattered. And in that knowledge, I found a renewed purpose, to be the father they deserved, to be the foundation they could rely on, no matter what. Life would never return to the way it was before, but it had settled into a new kind of normal. And while the pain and betrayal would forever mark our family, I found comfort in knowing that I could still be the dad my children needed, the person they could always turn to, no matter what.